to me, it was more safe to leave and jump than it was to stay the same. The idea of staying the same was so scary to me.
Hi, I'm Tesa Arcilla. In Choices and Chances, I use my own style of interviewing, honed through decades as an international news presenter and correspondent, to delve into a new topic each week and interview some of the most inspiring people in the world. Life is a series of choices that give us chances to live our best lives. My goal is to turn the wisdom of people I talk to and lessons from my own experiences into ideas you can use. So if you'd like to be inspired by other stories, hit the subscribe button and join the community. Aundrea, thank you so much for joining on the podcast today and making time to be here.
I'm so happy to be with you. Thank you for having me.
It's so great to meet you. I've been really looking forward to this interview. And as people know, we're both in the TV world. We're in the TV world. We were both on-air reporters and made a bit of a shift. And I want to start with something that I feel strongly about, identity, because a lot of journalists, I think they link their identity strongly to their work. And there are many professions like that: doctors, lawyers, artists. And so I'm going to start with a two-pronged question for you. When you were a journalist, how strongly did you link your identity to that? And when you made this shift into, shall we call it entrepreneurship? You can tell me where you're at now.
Yes.
And essentially, how do you now answer the who are you question?
Okay. So yes, I had a strong identity to journalism. So much so that I don't call myself a former journalist. I call myself a forever journalist, because I did it for more than 15 years in the traditional space, and journalism informs every single thing that I do now. And it informs my entrepreneurship. And I'm still very creative. And I feel like what I went into journalism to achieve, I'm doing it now, just on different platforms. So I still consider myself a journalist. But while I was I started to feel like the term reporter or anchor, like I felt like that was too limiting. And then I started calling myself a journalist because I wanted it to be broader. So for me, the term journalist is far broader and not as limiting. And so I was like, okay. Okay with that. So it didn't stop me from moving, but I did make a conscious decision of saying, hey, I need a bigger, not a bigger platform in terms of more people. I needed a broader platform to exercise my journalism. I didn't want to be in a box anymore. So that's that. But in terms of like how I introduce myself now, I stumble and fumble because it doesn't fit in a nice, neat box. And so I guess it just depends on who I'm talking to. That's the advice that I got. So for some people, I'm a podcast host. For other people, I have a strategic storytelling agency. And I say I help my clients tell better and more impactful stories about themselves, their work, and each other. To others, I am the founder of The Rewrite, that helps journalists and storytellers reinvent, reimagine, and reassess their careers in the face of the instability in the industry. So it really just depends on who I talk to, how I kind of define myself. But that's surprisingly been so hard.
Yes, and that's great advice, actually. I just learned from that, because it is hard to not be able to say something that makes sense to someone very quickly. And I'm like you, I fumble. And basically, it's nice to say it's okay to not have that umbrella theme, which is a funny thing coming from comms people. Aren't we always taught to have that umbrella messaging?
Right. Yeah, and it stressed me out.
Yeah.
It stressed me out a lot. Of, people would say, what do you do? And I take a deep breath. I'd look up in the air, and then it just kind of lowers your credibility. And so I've just said, okay, it's going to be long. It's not going to be one title, and I'm going to have to explain it a little bit. So I'm okay with that now.
That's a great place to be. I have the same thing with the "where are you from" question. I just never know how to answer that.
Right.
And when you talked about feeling like journalism as a term was broader. What was missing in what you were doing as a reporter and correspondent that you needed to address on a different platforms? What was the goal for you that you were looking to achieve?
Depth and context, I thought was severely missing. Um, and then also, I wanted to tell stories on different platforms. Like, I didn't want to just do local news. And then it's like, if you don't do local news, then do network. And I was like, I didn't want to just do network. I might want to do a documentary. I might want to do a YouTube series. I might want to do social media clips. Like, I might want to do a podcast. Like, but I didn't have access to that in the structure and system that I was in. And I didn't see them adopting that. But what I knew to be true was that none of my friends watched. Educated people not watching the news at all, not making an appointment. My parents make an appointment. None of my friends were making an appointment. And so I saw how management was addressing the shrink in viewership. And I'm like, this is unsustainable. Like, there's not going to be growth here. And I'm always trying to be on the growth curve. And so I was telling some important stories, but if you're telling an important story and you're not connecting with an audience, then it's like if a tree falls in the forest, nobody's there, doesn't make a sound. It's kind of like that. And so I wanted to be in places and spaces where I can make a sound, and that sound is making an impact.
I love all that. And I'd love to know where that comes from in you. Because as I said, what's available when we look you up are all your professional achievements. But where does that come from, where you want growth, where you want impact, where you want a bigger platform in the sense of being able to touch people's lives in a more direct way?
I think that comes from my family. My parents and my sister were born in Sierra Leone, West Africa, and so we were raised with this sense of community. So when you have, you give, and so I was raised very to understand that I have privilege of being an American. Like, that gives me a lot of privilege, and when you have privilege, you are to use it to the benefit of others. So there was that, and then my faith, that I grew up in. And then I adopted as my own as an adult, is that we're all here to serve. And so I recognized that I had a lot more capacity than the system allowed me to exercise. So while professionally I had won the awards, I had a very visible job. I had growth opportunities. They wanted me to take on an even bigger role that had kind of more pressure to it. And, they asked me to do a job I didn't even know existed, right? Like, to get a promotion. But I was just like, that's not how I want to serve. And I have capacity for more than this system will allow me to exercise. And so what do you do with all of that extra space that causes internal friction for me, right? And it's not anybody's fault. It was just being honest with myself about the reality of my situation. It had limitations on it, and I knew I could do more. And so I didn't know what more was. I didn't know what more looked like, but I knew that I had capacity for more, and I wanted to be able to not just be the bearer of bad news. I really wanted to give people information to help them improve their lives.
And that speaks to me so strongly. When you speak, I can feel a lot of confidence. And I do, like, I have that as well. And what I want to ask you is, when you do your rewrite course, so for those who don't know, the name of Andrea's course is Rewrite for journalists who want to get out of that. So there are a lot of journalists, even my friends, who feel that there's something else for them, but they don't necessarily have the same upbringing and confidence and strength that I think we have from our backgrounds.
Yes.
How do you teach that, and how do you instill that in an adult with a strong identity linked to their jobs and responsibilities, of course?
So I have been thinking about that so deeply and embarking on this venture, because it was almost kind of a fluke, right? So I started the rewrite because after I left traditional news in 2022, July 2022 is when I left. And I now had exposure to a lot of business people, small business owners, and I have a co-working space which is turned into my like core community. And I was like, people are speaking differently. People are approaching problems differently. Um, Thankfully, I've had amazing friends who have literally held my hand to shepherd me through this transition. And I was like, I know a lot of people don't have this. And I'm watching as consolidations continue, one layoff announcement after another mass layoff announcement, and over again. And with that, coupled with that, is that the job market is difficult, right? And so I'm like, I have all this exposure. So in true journalism fashion, when you know something, you have to share it, right? You can't keep it to yourself.
That's why we
So
can't be spies. I was
yes,
told by a spy.
exactly, exactly, exactly. So I started this community as a means of let's start having this conversation. So to answer your question of how do we approach it from a 360-degree view. So people come to us because they're like, I just want a new job. But I know that what you actually need is we have mental health support in it. And then we have tactical things of your LinkedIn, taking a career assessment to really know what else is out there, how to transfer your skills, talking with a recruiter to look at your resume, because you have to completely revamp your resume to be attractive to a broader audience. But that mental health piece, once people like go in deep with us, right? It's that mental health piece that they can keep coming back to. Because what happens in journalism is that you are in an environment where everybody is coping. Some coping skills that are not super helpful or healthy are normalized. And so when you're in a space where everyone's kind of acting the same, you don't know really what's healthy and what's not healthy. You don't know the messages that you are internalizing. And so sometimes, like for me, I had to have separation. And a lot of the work that I've done personally is unlearning things where I have to question my instincts to say, who said that? Is that even true? Who told? You're adopting this, but you haven't even critically examined, does that fit in this space now? It may have served you before, but does that actually fit now? And so the first step to that is realization. And once people understand how big this world is and how amazing their skills are, then it becomes really exciting. And the question is, what do you want to do? Not what do you think you can get? Those are very different questions. And so journalism operates in scarcity in terms of the stories we tell, but also that permeates our spirits as well, right? So I think that's our approach to it. Why it's really difficult to people. I've been having these conversations lately, and what I've recognized is that it comes down to safety. What does somebody deem as safe? What I deem as safe might not be what you deem as safe. To me, it was more safe to leave and jump than it was to stay the same. The idea of staying the same was so scary to me, of like being stagnant and being stuck. That idea was so stagnant to me. So people call me courageous, but what I tell them is that I had no other choice. Like it didn't feel like I made a decision. I felt like that was the only option before me, was to jump. I think it's the reverse for most people, that it feels safer to stay the same than it is to just open your aperture. We're not saying jump, but we just say open your aperture to just to look around, because to be a great journalist and to move up the ranks, you have to have tunnel vision, right? So that's great to move up the ladder, but when it comes to your personal and professional development, you've got to look around. So we just say do what you feel comfortable with. You can be in our community at the level of your comfort, and we try to grow your comfort over time, build your trust with us, create safe spaces. But yes, it comes down to safety, and the unknown feels very unsafe to most people.
I think that's a great way of putting it, at your own time, at your
Mhm.
own pace. But here is support that
Yes.
is there when you are ready. And maybe someone never gets there, but they have that's besides the point. But you providing that space, because yes, it's really hard I'm trying to figure out how to communicate that to someone when it is an internal thing that you can't just teach and memorize something or learn something
Yeah.
here. It's got to come from here. So you
Mhm.
found that it takes time with people.
It takes time, but we just start asking questions, right? So as journalists, we are so used to questioning other people, but we haven't really, I mean, you don't have time. It doesn't create time for you to sit with yourself, right? Like you're on to the next story, on to the next story. There you have a million things to do. And now it's even worse for those who are in because of the consolidations. People have so much more work that they have to do. And they're also and I think sometimes there's also a point where because someone is the interesting party at a dinner party, let's say, you say, I work for, and then everyone swarms around you. Do you know this person? Do you know this person? Oh, have you? I like it. People have opinions about wherever you work, and people want to know from you, like want to hear your stories. I think people think that's how it works when they're going to apply for another job. So they think that, like, I'll just get another job. So I do a lot of one on ones with people. And what they say is, I never knew how hard it was going to be to get another job. You have to employ completely new skills. You have to employ a completely new mindset, or else you are going to be sending resume after resume after resume. And then what happens is that your confidence gets shot, then your motivation is shot, and then you just start to spiral, right? And then money starts running out, and then that adds pressure, and then you get into scarcity mode, and you're just kind of like, I'll just take anything. So our whole point is create a rewrite strategy before you need a rewrite strategy. The more time you stay in, the better. And the strategy isn't to exit the profession. The strategy is all about giving yourself more options, creating more options for yourself. That's a mindset. And then there are tactical things that you can do, but more than anything, that's a mindset. And if you stay in for 20 more years, guess what? You'll have a lot more leverage. You'll probably make more money overall. You'll have a lot more contacts. So you'll be telling better stories. And you'll be choosing to stay, not because you had no other options, because you have proactively made that choice and said, that is the actual best choice for my life. And I have more work to do here. I have more stories in me to tell. That's a very different posture to go to work in than this is all I can do. This is all I've ever known. So we're just trying to, again, we're agnostic as to what people determine their rewrite to be, but saying that you can't, I always say your journalism skills transfer, your journalism mindset does not.
Yes, and I think having a plan B, it's empowering
Mhm.
because it means if you choose your current path as your path, it is a conscious choice. You didn't just stay there because it's the only thing available. And I think I actually have that mindset with everything, including choosing the life that I have or the
Yeah.
relationship that I have, because you can't just say, well, this is what I ended up with, therefore. And
Yeah.
I think it's a great way of putting it again, where you have a strategy, you may or may not need it, but you have it and you have the
Mhm.
choice. I think that's
Mhm.
such a powerful message to give, because as you rightly pointed out as well, and I want to move on to that, is the world is not an easy place. Just because you work
Yeah.
for this amazing big network, someone's going to say, oh, they did. Oh, okay. By association, let's hire this person because that's amazing. It doesn't work that way. And
Mm-mm.
we've seen that starting a business is difficult.
Mhm.
And what has your experience been in that sphere without getting drawn back? Or if you may never have been in the scarcity mindset, but getting into that fear, having that fear of, oh my God, what did I just do? I've leapt off, no safety nets. Now I'm in the world of starting a business on my own. It's not easy. How did you navigate that?
So you know what? I took a lot of great steps while I was still in my journalism career. So I leveraged everything. So the first thing that I did, and I didn't know how all the dots connected. Sometimes people want like a whole blueprint. Like first I do this. I didn't. I just did the next. My podcast is called The Next Best Thing because that's what I did. I just did the next best thing. So one major thing I did was that I networked like crazy. I went out to events by myself all the time. So after I got my first job in news, which was in Macon, Georgia, making $18,000 a year, I struggled to get that job. And then I left, and then the stock market crashed in 2008 and 2009, and I was out of work, and I was like, oh my God, what did I do? Like, and I said, and I had no contacts. I had nothing. So I'm putting my resume tape out there with the hundreds of people applying for each job. And at that point, it was physical tapes, and they had the bins, the
Yes.
postal service bins outside of the office door, and you could. And I told myself, you will never put yourself in that position again, to be one of many in a bin. I needed to figure out a way to get a little competitive edge, because I knew that I was good at my job, but I always knew that, like, the resume or the resume tape wasn't going to be this thing that people were like, oh, we've been waiting for her, right? Like, she's exactly who we've been waiting for. So I was like, okay, what can I do? And I always look at what people are not doing and do that. That's how I've always looked at, like, what are people not doing? When people didn't want to cover government, I'm covering government. I'm going to raise my hand for that. I'm not going to do the thing that everybody else is doing. And so I was like, okay, I hate the way this feels. I was out of work for 9 months, and I got my old job back, and I was scheduling surgeries at an orthopedic surgeon's office. And I was like, this is not what I want to do. So first it was expanding my journalism network, going to conferences, actually speaking to people, actually following up. So I built out that muscle. Then when I moved to Philadelphia, the advice that I got from a woman who was, like, on the assignment desk, like the assignment desk manager, she was like, here, you have to be a socialite. Because the people of Philly, when you're not from there, you're very much of an outsider, and it can be really hard to get stories. So she was just like, that was her one thing to me. You have to be a socialite if you're on air. So I was like, oh my God. So I would go out to events, and I would meet people just so I could get stories. And then I was kind of in a precarious position there, and I got a coach. And he said, if you lost your job today, who are the 3 people that you would call? Not to commiserate with, but the 3 people who could open the door to a new opportunity. And I only had one. And he was like, you've got a lot more work to do. So I shifted where I needed to meet people outside of journalism. And I needed to, like, start to get to know people in an authentic way, basically going to make friends. So that's what I started to do, go to conferences outside. So I say all this to say, when I transitioned, I didn't know what my life was. I didn't know that years later, this moment, I'd be at this crossroads, this really pivotal crossroads. But every dollar I have made in the last almost 2.5 years has come from a friend. Every single dollar. I've been able to sustain myself because of friends. This is like a financial move too, right? Because that was my biggest concern. I saved money, right, to buy time so I wouldn't get in scarcity mode. I work a lot. And right now, I still go out all the time. I have the co-working community. I always catch up with people. Hey, do you want to meet in person? Sure. It's all inconvenient. I'm an introvert, right? Like, it is not, but I enjoy people, especially one-on-one. But I put myself out there. So when I was in, I would leverage my title. Oh, I'm a reporter at this station. I can host your fundraiser. I can moderate your conversation. I would just put myself out there and say yes, 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 yes. I would the company, one of the companies I worked with had a program, a leadership program. I nominated myself for the leadership program. I just put myself out there, and I would have never guessed this would have happened for me, but I put up in July of 2022, this is my last day. Thank you so much. And a friend called me and offered me a position in her, like a freelance gig in her company. A friend knew a friend for another freelance gig. Another friend months later was leading this transition for this startup. Hey, can you help me do? I didn't know what I was doing. I said, sure. And that's
Yeah.
how I got to where I am today. So a lot of people want to rely on their resume and like, I'll just apply to another job. Yes, you can get another job, but I never want to be in a pool of resumes and have that be my only way to play this game. Like, I want somebody
Mm.
to call somebody on my behalf and say, she's amazing. You need to meet with her, which is what keeps happening.
You and I are both introverts, and I'm trying to help other introverts thrive in careers like ours. What is it that drives you to do something despite it being uncomfortable? I have my own version of that, which is I don't like doing a bad job. So I like doing a job well. So if it is about succeeding in this career, I will do what is needed, which means getting over my, oh my God, do I need to go to this event? But I will, and then I enjoy
Yes.
it like you. So what
Yes.
for you, what is it that pushes you? What is that North Star for you when you say, I'm gonna do it?
What's the alternative? Right? So is the alternative not making any money? Is the alternative, um, like I don't not feel fear. I just don't let it make the decisions for me. And again, it's like, again, running to jump off the cliff. It's like what the alternative was so undesirable to me. And I'm like, well, if this is what it takes to succeed, that I just have to get over myself and do it. Live shots used to terrify me. And guess what? You just do it over and you're horrible at first, right? You're just terrible. You're stiff. You're not conversational. Or me, I was not breathing when I first did it. You know what I mean? But you have to get up and do it the next day and get up and do it the next day. You have a gaff live on air. You want to crawl under the ground and you get up and you do it the next day. And so that's why I say journalism has informed everything that I've done, because it's like, I might not have done this new thing, but I've done the hard things before. I have a muscle memory to pull from. So I thought before I transitioned, I thought, I've got to become a different person. Like, I literally was like, I got to get brand new, like wipe the slate clean and get brand new skills. And it's not true. I'm just like, okay, I might not have done it this way, but I have done this before. And this is what I do. And then if I'm uncomfortable, I just go into my reporter mode, because you have to talk to strangers all the time. You
Mhm.
had to get man on the street interviews all the time. So you just go into reporter mode. And guess what? People are very endeared that's like our skill, where people are very endeared by us. We make people feel very comfortable, even if we're just putting on and we're like, oh my God, I don't want to be here. This is awful. They don't know that, right? And so that can help you build the muscle memory out. And so I think you just have to take yourself out of it, and you can address that thing later. But right now it's
Mhm.
time to get to work, just like how we had to do when a minute before the live shot and the light goes out, or
Yeah.
something breaks, or something's happened. They're saying your name in your ear and you're about to go, and you just got to figure it out, right? Like, you've got to get in the zone and figure. It's the same thing. So I just get in the zone and go into my journalism mode and figure it out, and then I can unpack all that stuff when I come back home and sort through it.
That's really empowering. And speaking of the man on the street, I hate doing the vox pops,
Oh,
but then
hated it.
once,
The
once you
worst. The
do,
worst.
yeah, but once you make that connection with just one person, it actually feels really good. And as we like the one-on-ones, right? So I end
Yeah.
up talking, my cameraman hated it when I end up chatting with someone longer than I needed to, right? Because all we need is 10 seconds. And then
Yeah.
I'm just there chatting and asking questions. But yes, hated it, especially when I was living in Hong Kong. It's a society that is in a rush. No one wants to talk to strangers. Like, it was hard. But you're right, all these skills, they're useful. We use them all the time now in building what we want to do. And you mentioned something about what everyone else is doing, I'll do the opposite, because you don't want to just be part of that pile. Is
Mhm.
that your strategy for your comms clients? Like, is that one of the things that you say to stand out? It's actually quite noisy now when everyone's trying to be a thought leader, get out there. And I love that people are trying to, because I think on a broader scale, we need diversity in discourse. And I feel
Mhm.
really strongly about that. But it is hard to break through. So what do
Mhm.
you tell your comms clients?
So for like media training, I actually lean into authenticity because I think the corporate world is still rather robotic because they're so afraid of saying the wrong thing. And so we start with what do you believe? And then build out the messaging from that core function because that won't lie, right? What is it that you believe and leaning in, and I try to deprogram their robot type of tendencies because like when people aren't used to speaking on camera or being interviewed or being on a stage, they become who they think the audience wants them to be, and that's a caricature, right? Like that's not real. And so instead of focusing on perfection, we just focus on the humanity piece, and we focus on the examples you give and how to resonate with your audience, but as yourself. You should feel recognizable to yourself in all of these interactions, even as a spokesperson for this major Fortune 500 company. So I actually lean into the authenticity because I think that's what's changed in communications, is that no one wants to look messaged up because you lose all credibility that way.
Yeah, and I think that's getting a lot more attention. It's the same again as being a journalist when you have a pre-prepped or media trained person who speaks
Mm-hmm.
in sound bites. Yes, it's easy to cut, but it's just you don't get it's not a real answer, and you just
Right.
probe and you probe and you probe. And but one thing though, is there a need for corporate shift, like a cultural shift inside corporations? Because a lot of people are afraid to speak because they'll get into trouble, and they do when they kind of go off the script, right?
Right. I think it's the there's still a script. It shouldn't look like there's a script, right?
Hmm.
It's like anchors. Like it shouldn't look like they're reading from a teleprompter, but they are. But they know how to the partner that I work with, she always tells them you have to lift it off the page and make it your own. Right. So they're gonna get their briefing books and all of that stuff. But you have to, it's a skill to lift it off the page and make it your own, which is why we say start with what you believe and build the messaging around that, because it will automatically be authentic. And then depending on what it is, if it's a crisis, you can't bring in your personal stuff. But if it's just like a product launch or something like that, to bring in your personal experience to it. Do you have kids that play this game? Are you a gamer? Like, if stuff like that, like bringing in your personal experience makes you seem more human. And I always say humans connect with humans, not robots, not companies, not messages. Humans connect with humans. So you need to be human here.
And that's a great point to start off my next question, which I discovered when I entered this world of entrepreneurship, AI's presence. So
Oh yeah.
we have been using AI, like in my previous newsroom, it's been so useful. So we've been using it daily for our work, on air work as well. And now in entrepreneurship, you just realize though, if you're not using it, you will fall behind in terms of
Yes.
efficiency and speed. But
Yes.
there's also now the question of over reliance on it. And as you say, humans want to talk to humans.
Yeah.
They don't want to talk to a robot. And I think input in would determine the quality of the output of your
Yes.
AI. But I still see overuse of it in some ways, but also that I think it's a powerful tool that we should be optimizing. What is your take on AI? When and how, and what are the ethical dilemmas that you've seen?
So it's so important, and I agree that everybody should be utilizing it because it's here. It's here to stay, and it is transforming the workforce faster than we have ever seen. And you're lucky that in your newsroom they used it, because a lot of newsrooms do not and don't adopt technology, and that's another way that traditional journalists are being left behind when they're transferring. If they're going to transfer their skills to another industry, they're not even privy to the technology that's being used every single day in other companies, and it just creates a steeper learning curve. I use AI all the time. I think that it's useful only as a first draft. it is just a way, it's like a brain dump, and help me organize my brain dump, and then you can go and finesse it. I think it's also a skill in terms of the input, right? Like in terms of the question that you ask it. I think you have to get really good at asking it the right question, and I don't know if people are really spending as much time as necessary on the input of it, so it can generate something useful, that doesn't seem so robotic, right?
Yeah.
In return. So, in terms of my work, I use it. I use it in my work for, help me with a summary, help me with a newsletter, help me with, just because, because of entrepreneurship, I'm juggling so much. And it's like my brain is fried sometimes. And I just need, oh, yes, I know what I want to say,
Mm.
but I just need you to like organize it. And I'm a solopreneur for right now. And it's just like, I just don't have the bandwidth and capacity. So I think it's something we don't have a choice but to embrace. But I think it's really important for us to be users of it because it's still changing. And so when you're using it, you can now have impact on a collective impact on how it progresses. And what we want is it, because I did this event maybe 2 years ago now, and had an expert come on, and the whole thing was about AI and how to make it more equitable. And the conversation was that, this is something we could get right if there's more, kind of input early on. Like we saw what happened with the internet, it was unregulated, it kind of went rampant. And so, you kind of have to create some sort of guardrails, but also I think there needs to be a collective input. So, it might help make it a more equitable society. Like the progress it's making in healthcare could be amazing and create more access for people, things of that nature. I think there's just so much possibility, but the people who could be the most harmed need to put their input in now and be, it's not necessarily early adopters at this point, but they need to be adopters of it heavily now so we can influence how it, continues to evolve in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I just was looking at all the applications now for leaders, for example, when I wanted to look into the ethical dilemmas the same way that journalists had, we face that all the time. And in there needs to be a huge part of human impact in the actual decision making in
Hmm.
using AI. You can't let AI decide for you or do
Yeah.
the work for you. It is
Yeah.
a tool. And I think people forget it is a tool. And one thing that I'm very wary about, and I always, when I do a prompt, I always say list your sources,
Yes.
because that's a skill that as a journalist we have. List your sources, then I go back to the references, then I
Yes.
look and I check. And actually, it can be quite frustrating talking to AI when you go, well, this is absolutely wrong. Oh, yes, I apologize. Well, okay. And so
Yeah.
it's not there yet. And therefore, let's focus on how it can be a tool and in
Yes.
helping improve it. And let's not forget our own role
Yes.
in the work, in
Yes.
ethical guidelines, guardrails, you called it,
Right.
right?
And, I asked it something the other day of like creating a calendar, like throughout the year of specific event. It got so much stuff wrong. Like, but
Mm,
it's that cross referencing of it. But it was like a day that, oh, I forgot this day exists. So let me find the right day. So amending the calendar, but I do the cite your sources thing too. And sometimes
yeah.
it's right and sometimes it's wrong. It can hallucinate. Like there's so many things that can happen, but I think it is merely a tool. It is your co-pilot. It is not, it is not the leader in taking things. Like I don't, I know they do this in like San Francisco with like the driverless cars and like I'm not there yet. I'm
Yeah.
not there. I
Yeah.
mean, like, nope, no, thank you. I like it to be able to do other things, but yeah, there's so many. If we're talking about it in the reference to journalism, what I see a lot of, again, speaking to the not adopting technology, is that you have all these consolidations happening in the newsroom, and now you're saddling the people who are left with even more responsibilities. Their pay is not going up. In fact, a lot of places are saying, by the way, pay freeze. So you're effectively making less, doing so much more. And I think it's irresponsible not to introduce AI into the workplace, because what you're going to do is burn out your employees, right? Like, I do think that there are ways to create efficiencies to help people out, especially on administrative tasks,
Yeah.
archiving, logging, like, things of that nature. Um, Maybe writing a first draft of a VOSAT or a VO for the 11 o'clock show after it's run all day long. You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
like there are just different ways to make it useful and helpful in this consolidation strategy, so you can give your existing employees a little bit of breathing room, and to help morale, right? To
Yeah.
I feel really bad for folks in newsrooms right now. Like, it's really hard. But I do think that there are like real issues with like copyright. So what is being used to train these large language models, right? We really need to look at that. And that's where I think legislation can come in, because it's like OpenAI or some of these other companies, they need to be paying for this information that they're scrubbing off of the internet to train these models. And so there's a lot in terms of ownership of like what is intellectual property, and where does this blur the lines, so I do think that there are a lot of issues with it, but I think right, it's not going to go away.
Going back to your entrepreneurial journey, where are you going now? Because you said when you started it, it's different
Yeah.
to what you thought you would do. And how do those little steps happen for you? And how do you know, oh, right, this is where I want to go?
So when I left, I was like, I want to do long form storytelling. So as I said before, that the context and depth and like cultural competency, like that's what I felt like was missing in the conversations that I was having in the newsrooms that caused friction for me. So I thought I was going to do documentaries or like long form in some way, and saying, I want to do stories and then find a home for them, that was very lofty. And I thought I was close enough being in news to these, other storytelling platforms, that it would be just a seamless transition, right? Wrong. I could not get a door open in those spaces at all. In the meantime, I took the first year to just say yes to everything, because that was another thing, is just like, I looked around and was like, technology is growing. All these platforms have emerged, and I haven't played on any of them like properly. So, I have I like right now I produce a web series, and then I also produce like this social I don't know if you call it a social series, which is like addressing misinformation and disinformation. um and then I've executive produced a radio show. I have a podcast. So like, I do live event production. So I'm producing live journalism events. And so it's just like all these different areas now I have exposure to. So I just said yes to try things out. I even dabbled in PR, knowing I would hate it, knowing I would, but I just said yes because it was a check. And I was like, don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
You hate it. Great career path, just not for me. And I knew that when I was in college, but here we are, right? Like, so I just said yes to everything. And then I could sit and assess. Sometimes it's hard to say what you want to do or what you don't want to do when you haven't had the experience. Like, how are you going to say and that's what people have when you're talking about what keeps people stuck sometimes, is because they haven't been exposed to anything else. Because I would say we're the dreamers. We're the ones who dreamed about this often as a kid, as a young person. We pursued it. We got it. We, made our dream a reality. We've had these great experiences, but we haven't experienced the world in the same way as other people have, right? And there's no one to one exactly of, if I'm a reporter here and I'm not going to be in traditional media anymore, I can't go be a reporter in corporate America. You know what I mean? Like, that just doesn't exist. So you have to transfer your skills to something else. So I had to figure out, before I could figure out where I wanted to go, I had to go experience some things first, and figure out, do I like being in the office a lot? Do I not? Can I be productive working from home? Can I not? Like, I had to figure out, what am I productive most in the mornings? Am I productive in the afternoon? I had to figure, I didn't know myself really, because I had been told who to be, how to sound, how to look. Like I had been told a lot of how to write, what a good story is, what a bad story is. I had been told all of these things. And then like now the canvas was clear and I had to say, what do I like? What actually works for me? Like, and if I like something, why? And if I don't like something, why? And even in journalism jobs that were amazing, my job in Nashville was one of the best jobs I've ever had ever. I loved it, loved it, loved it. I had to deconstruct, what did I love? I love that my manager gave me space to grow. I love that I had a team that was focused on excellence and they were anal about the things I was anal about. I loved, and I had to be very clear. So it was just getting that clarity. So what I used to do was a little bit of everything. Now I have two sides of my business. One side is the creative project side. So it's again doing the web series, producing the web series, doing media training for corporate executives. As I said, like I do some on-camera stuff. I have some clients where I do on-camera stuff or like teach storytelling to companies. That's the kind of creative storytelling side. My other side is about career and life transitions and really helping people navigate it. So through the rewrite, that's one side, and then through my podcast, The Next Best Thing, where I interview experts, friends, just about either a specific topic or their personal story of how they've kind of gotten from where they are to where they want to be.
And to end this, I would love, you've given us so much wisdom already, but if you could challenge people and reflect on one thing, taking away from this conversation, what would you like them to think about that would really push them out of their comfort zones?
I would like people to ask themselves, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? And if that's too hard, I'd start by saying, what do you value? So I valued my parents. Okay. My parents are getting older. I value the time I spend with them. And then I asked myself, am I spending a lot of time with them? And when I spend time with them, are they getting the best version of me, or are they getting the sleepy version of me, or the irritated or the burned out version of me? What are they actually getting? I love to travel, right? Am I traveling? Do I even have vacation time to travel? I love the ability to try to create generational wealth in my life. Where I am going to put me in a position to do that? And it was no, no, no. Like everything was no. And so I realized along the way that what I had valued changed, and that where I was could no longer serve the goals that I had for my life. So what do you love? What lights you up? And can you do it where you are right now? And if the answer is no, that doesn't mean you need to do anything. Don't do anything drastic. Don't do anything drastic. Then start asking yourself, what's one small step I can take today to get me closer to this thing? And it's a combination of small steps, not big leaps. So it looks on the outside like I took a big leap, but for 10 years I was taking small steps. And that's the stuff that other people don't see. So I think, but it just starts with radical honesty. Don't judge yourself, because it's who you are. It's how you're wired. It's how you think. It's how your heart gets open. It's how what
don't
you
filter.
love. Don't filter it. Don't judge yourself, because that's who you are. Because imagine if you could be in a place where you are fully realized, where you are lit up. It's not going to be every day. No one's lit up every day, but you are lit up on most days, where you don't have to dim, hide, minimize yourself. You don't have to look over your shoulder. You can just operate in your flow, right? Like imagine if that could be your reality. And I'm here to say it absolutely can, but it takes intention.
Yes. And I don't want to end it here yet, because you mentioned something that I want to touch on, because women don't talk about it enough. I also want to create generational wealth, and I want to be open about that. But as a journalist, it went against my instinct of I'm here for service and service alone.
Yeah.
Let's face it, as you get older, you have more responsibilities. Is this the path for you? Is entrepreneurship, or whatever we want to call it now, just doing what you want field, able to lead us to some sort of wealth building that with all the pay freezes and pay cuts, we won't really get in a career in journalism unless you're a household name?
1,000%. And it was like in the conversations with my boss, so they were offering me a new job, and we were negotiating, and it was a terrible negotiation. And I was like, do you know how much money I've lost being here right now? Like, with my expertise, like, I always knew that I could go make more money. So entrepreneurship is hard. I'm spending the startup costs and all of that stuff. So I am not there yet, but I don't have a ceiling on how much I can make. And really it was, part of the decision to leave was that I have to fight for all of these pennies, right? I'm asking for market stuff. I'm not asking for I hang the moon and the stars. I'm asking, this is what the market dictates. If I went across the street and they offered me the same thing, they would be offering me a lot more. You're trying to get me on discount. I'm fully aware of this. We are very far apart. But then I was like, if I have to fight this hard for this, and then journalism operates we're going to give you 3%, 4%, 5%, and these small little inflationary, inflation is higher than that. So the math just doesn't add up. It literally is a basic math equation. So I was just like, yeah, no, I'm that's why I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I know I have 2 degrees. I have all these, this counts for somewhere. I don't know where it counts, but it has to count somewhere. And then I also knew that I had the work ethic to, even if I had to take a few steps back, that it would be I'd be catapulted forward. But I'm not trying to, and if this is people's lane, and I don't have children and I don't have a partner, so I have privilege in that space, that I don't have to feed anybody but myself. But I was like, I don't want to be 60 on the street covering snow. I was like, that can't be my life. Right? I just can't. I can't. And I don't really want to be working. I want work to be optional by the time that I'm honestly 55, which is 13 years from now. I really want work to be where I'm right now. I get to do all the things that I love with people that I love. But I do have to be more conscious about how much money have I made so far, whatever. But by that time, I'm only doing the things that I love. I'm only doing what I love and taking a break, because I've made enough money and I've invested enough money. And, even if I have children at that time, they will be good because I'm operating in a space where I don't have a ceiling. I can go make as much money as I want to go make. I can figure out how to make money.
If anyone wants to take one thing from this, is take Aundrea's belief and confidence in her vision. I think that's so empowering. You really have to have that. Otherwise, you can't get to a bigger life, a bigger dream.
Yeah, you've got to start. I always say on my social media, I do Friday wins, and I say you have to celebrate yourself before anybody celebrates you. So when they say you're amazing, you can say, welcome to this party that's already begun. Right?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. It's been so empowering talking to you. Thank you, Aundrea.
I so love this conversation. Thank you so much for having me.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider giving us a 5-star rating so others can find the podcast. Thank you for your company, and see you next time.